Thank you for tuning in once again. My name is Kyle Sigler. I am not a pastor by any means. I just simply want to advocate for something I'm interested in, and that's really Christianity. And today I wanted to hop into the book of Nehemiah, probably mispronouncing that to be fair. I was reading through this on my daily Bible readings, and I thought this was a rather potentially insignificant book. It's got less than 20 chapters, and it's really shocked me as to the power behind it. Much of that, to be fair, is owed to this Life Application Bible. I highly recommend this. It really brings the works and the writings to life. So who is Nehemiah? Why does it matter? Why is this book even in the Bible in the first place? Like, why should we even care? It's funny to note that I've never recalled a time where I've been in church sermon and a pastor's actually talked about this book, or maybe he has, and I didn't quite, it just went over my head. I didn't even grasp it. So he was simply put a leader, and among a number of spectators, complainers, false prophets at the time, he was a true actor. He didn't just talk, he actually did. And it's really inspiring for today because a lot of people like to be influencers. They like to talk about various things, but no one really wants to truly be an actor. And to that point, he looked at the state of Jerusalem. So, tribes of Judah and Benjamin, the two tribes out of the 12 in the south, um, they had fallen into sin. Basically, they had been taken over. But Nehemiah was this rather powerful figure. He wasn't by any means the king of Persia, but he was a cupbearer. And while it might seem like, oh, he's just a small role, this was a very important role. He probably had some wealth to him. He definitely had the king's ear, and he had a lot of respect from the king. So much so that when he was troubled that he thought about the wall in Jerusalem not being rebuilt and that the city's basically in ruins, he looked at it and he says, okay, the foreigners are inhabiting it. I feel terrible about this. What can I do? So he comes in looking crestfallen, and the king acknowledges. So he did have the king's ear. And he spoke to authority. And even though the authority was not of the tribe of Judah, obviously it was a foreigner who was ruling over the basically the former Israelites, the tribe of Judah, the Jewish people at the time. He approached him with respect. And I think this is a really powerful note because when we feel troubled, we can often go to authorities and complain. And complaint isn't going to really get you anywhere. You essentially just complaining on and on will never really yield any real results. Instead, he approached it with complete respect to authority. And I think this really is interesting to tie into the gospel with Jesus because, obviously it was the Romans who crucified him, but he even said, give to Caesar what is owed to Caesar, right? So, and even later, the Holy Spirit talks to the apostles and future disciples, and they always approach people who are persecuting them with love and with obviously respect for authority. So it's a really powerful lesson for us as we try to enact change in our communities. And he took action really when he was troubled with this problem that the wall has not been rebuilt. And he used this building up of a wall to really kind of ignite a revolution, which I think is so fascinating that he's simply building a structure around a city, something that's very physical and material that wouldn't be noteworthy, especially in this Bible, is suddenly a really interesting story of revival. And it really asks you to like look at your own talents because certainly he was not the one who built the entire wall. That would have been impossible. He was the leader who formed a congregation around it, and then they went out and they did the change as a community. That's what a church is a community. And really the church's goal should be to create change. It should not simply to be spectators in the world. And that's the criticism that I would have of the current church. Not all churches, certainly, but a good amount is that they're simply spectators. And it's hard because you don't want to act out, you don't want to risk persecution. You don't want to risk losing your job. But those are all material things. And when talking about something like God and really eternity, it begs the question of, should I actually risk and forego for something greater than myself? And that's something only, we can internally decide on. Nevertheless, I look at myself, for instance, when I get interested in something, I cannot stop talking about it. I feel very passionate about whatever I learn that really piques my interest. That's why I'm simply sharing this with you today. And to that end, I feel like my talents would be in advocating, but yours may not be. Yours may be to act in a different way. And it's never to say that a certain role, certain position is below anyone else. That, yes, there was a book in the Bible written about this man. That's because he was an actor. That's because he actually used the talents given to him. But many other people were mentioned in the book who were the priests, who held other positions. They were named, and that doesn't mean that they're less. That doesn't mean that they're more, right? This is kind of the real sense of the word equality. And a lot of times in the Bible, you'll see the term equality. And I think the term today has a very hollow meaning. It doesn't hold much weight when we talk about equality, but this is real equality, realizing that everyone has their unique talents. And how do we build a congregation to really harness that energy for the greater good? And this leads it into the book. So that's setting the stage. The king does listen to him. He ultimately decides to let him go, and he returns back after his journey and immediately met with opposition. So these two characters in this book, Sanballat and Tobiah, they try to sabotage him, and they even try to have their own home. And here it's once again evil foreigners trying to sneak in through a seemingly trivial matter, right? Oh, it doesn't matter that anyone can praise. Why can't we be priests? And it wasn't so much about racial segregation by any means, even though Nehemiah realizes that you shouldn't marry foreigners, and that in the two tribes that he mentions in the book wasn't to say that these tribes are inferior. It's that the people were pursuing sin, and he didn't want to associate himself. And how did he deal with opposition? That was really an interesting point that piqued my interest, because he used four techniques. One would be prayer immediately, praying anywhere. The idea that you had to pray in the top of a mountain in complete silence is quite honestly nonsense. There's a place for that, certainly. Jesus did go up, especially when he fasted, right? Fasting and prayer, and he was being alone, right? But that was a very special journey in his life. And we will all have those special journeys. But if you need immediate results, the number one thing that you should do is not turn to the person next to you and ask for their help. It's to pray, to be still, rejoice in the presence, and simply ask for help, and yield to whatever the answer may be. So the first thing's prayer. Second thing is that he encourages other fellow Jewish people that, yes, we are seeing opposition. Yes, people do want to stop this, and they had to stop for a very short period, but immediately they picked it back up and they started rebuilding the wall in Jerusalem. So he continued to encourage. The third thing is that he had guardianship. We all need a guardian. We all need to guard ourselves. He actually allowed people who were building the wall to take stand and take guard of it. So the question is, what wall do I need to create in my life? And then secondly, how do I guard that so that people of sin, people who would seemingly be harmless, but really could make a drastic change in your life and in your faith, how do I guard against that? That was something that really hit me, and I'm still pondering on it to this day. or to this time, I should say. And the fourth thing would be consolidation. He looked to consolidate the people of Judah. He wanted a revival. How do you do that? Well, you can't have everyone separated across a massive empire. You needed these people to come together and to unite. And that's the big thing in this divisive nation of America right now that I live in. Everyone's divided. And the idea is, how do you unite? And you don't unite on politics because politics will always be divisive. There's always going to be something that someone's going to disagree on. And you can never have this whole cohesive body. And while there is some division in the current church, right, with different denominations and different beliefs, this is the truth. And it's written that the truth will set you free. So start thinking about a higher level of thought rather than kind of muddling around in modern day politics and different social issues. While they are important and they should be part of your life, they shouldn't be all of it. And unity in the idea of building a Christian community wherever you are and uniting along these ideas, that kind of consolidation, that kind of unification is where real change is going to happen. And that's what I got from this book is those four things. And really, Nehemiah confronts evil, and he even confronts his own people, that sometimes people within the church, just for instance, in the book, he sees wealthy extorting poor peasants from the countryside. He says something about that. So in order for unification to happen broadly, you have to look at individual areas. So I look at, bureaucratic hierarchical structures, right? If the top's exploiting the bottom, someone needs to say something about it. Someone actually needs to take action on it. That doesn't mean complain. That doesn't mean overthrow authority. And that's not, revolution doesn't have to be violent. Revolution doesn't have to be, forcing or bullying your way through. I mean, Nehemiah simply asked, and all of this happened simply by asking. Then you can have, amazing things happen. And I think that's really kind of the fascinating point is that, he didn't have to trick. Trickery was never involved. He just felt empowered and he asked. And then he did, and he went, and he never complained. He never influenced along the way. He never opened up his social media account and tried to basically dupe people into this delusion. And he was never grander than himself. All the things that we see today with modernity and all the issues that come along with that. He simply acted. So, how do I protect myself from temptation? I thought about this and I thought the first thing you should immediately do is pray. Number one, stop, pray. Secondly, distance yourself. Just as Nehemiah advocated for separating the Jewish people from other tribes at the time who were sinning, we need to separate ourselves. So separation can be taking the stance that, if I'm going to date someone, that I shouldn't date someone who's not of the faith. This kind of idea that, I'll date them and then they're going to turn over to the faith somehow is not going to happen. And you can't really argue your way or convince someone of faith. It's all in the spiritual realm that someone ultimately makes the choice. And thirdly, you need to, after distancing yourself, put yourself to work, put yourself into action. And the action could be, doing your job very well. It could be, devoting yourself to the truth. It could be sharing the truth and really creating the unity. And what I mean by that is using your talents. I think that's what this whole book really encompasses is how can you use your talents to make a difference? What this ultimately culminated in was that Ezra, a leader mentioned in the Bible already, he leads the city into worship. So Ezra was not the social actor, maybe like Nehemiah was. Ezra was someone who was a spiritual leader. And he really got the revival going because he basically gathered everyone. They all read through the book of Moses and since the laws, so they understood the truth at the time, and then they unified on it. They praised, praised for half of the day at a time, and they made it like one of the greatest festivals and praises that had happened in many generations. It was something incredibly remarkable. So what I got from this is you need to align on purpose. This, this is the purpose. Secondly, you need to have like what we would nowadays call a target audience, right? Who's your target audience? This could be like a small group. For instance, if you have a Bible study, for me, it would be like a young adults group. And thirdly, is making it habitual. We call this, oh, you do it for 21 days, you have a habit, right? This fancy term of a habit. But really, they use tradition. That's it. Those are habits over multi-generational. It's a multi-generational habit is basically a tradition, right? And it's something that they highly respected. So how do you do this, right? Like, how do we actually make the impact? And I think, for young Christian adults who are maybe anxious about this idea of meeting with others, you could just simply, meet on purpose for, a sporting event or for a very quick Bible reading. And the idea is not that you're doing something that's to distract you, it's aligning on the purpose of unifying and then praising. So, yeah, you might be coming together with the guys to play basketball. And yes, you so happen to be Christians, but what's the deeper meaning behind that? It's not that you're in a basketball league, it's that you're in fellowship and you're actually doing work together. The quickest way to become a man's best friend, right, is to work alongside him and sweat with him. That kind of teamwork will transcend, just like how building a wall around Jerusalem ended up creating this whole revolution and revival. Um, and to me, you're disconnecting from the outside world and then you're focusing. So they disconnected, they separated themselves, they made themselves, in a sense, holy, which I think the word holy is really meaning to separate. So they wanted to act in a way that was righteous. They did that by separating themselves, aligning on the purpose of building the wall, and then all these great things happened from it. So God depended on Nehemiah, just like he depends on me and just like he depends on you. We're a family that have been adopted by God, by Christ, and they depend on us. The Trinity depends on us, but they want to equip us, and they will allow you to seek His purpose. So when you pray, don't pray for the nice car because that doesn't matter at all to God. Pray to do God's will, and then He'll show you it. The only thing is whether you're going to yield and follow. Nehemiah obviously did. And really, this is all fulfilling prophecy. So it's interesting to mention that Zechariah and Daniel prophesied about the rebuilding of Jerusalem. And then he fulfills this through basically all these supernatural events. And while he probably initially was comforted by his wealth, he gave it all up at Persia. He left all of that to reunite with his community. And he didn't know these people. Most likely, he didn't know all of them. And yet, here he is. He's uniting with one another. And this is just like a really interesting story. And it begs some questions, and I wrote them down here. So, how many of my actions are meant to please myself versus pleasing God? That's something that's very powerful to me because, yes, it might be fun, right? It might be enjoyable, but is it for the pleasure of God? And that doesn't mean that you have to spend all day shut in just reading the word, right? Like I'm sure there's a place for that, if you wanted to fast, right? But you also have to go to work. You have to be a contributing member of society. You have to actually do actions. Sometimes you have to build a wall like he did. So you have to act in a way that pleases God. And whether your actions are pleasing God or basically are they in line with Scripture is what I'm doing in line with Scripture. So that's the short answer. Obviously, the long answer is that you get through this and you start applying it. You start going to church and you start learning about ways that you can actually make a real impact in yourself, your family, your friends, your community, and all for the purpose of pleasing God. And then, secondly, is do you always give credit to God for your own accomplishments? You know, like the example, oh, you made a basket. Fantastic. Everyone's, patting you on the back. Now, let's say that it wasn't just a basket. Let's say it was a major promotion. And are you going to be boastful and prideful and say, I always had this. It was always in me. It was just a matter of time, whatever it might be, whatever the wording might be, or you're going to say, praise be to God for what has been given to me. Because all wealth, the sources of everything, don't come from the physical. And that's the whole idea of higher level thinking, that you're not doing this for the physical, you're doing this for a spiritual reason. And then all the benefits of the physical will come, the promotion will come, the family life will come. It's just a matter of time. And sometimes it will be stripped away from you, like you can see from Job, for instance, but your accomplishments will come. It's just whether you give praise when they do come. Because not only do you call on God when you're low, you should also call on God when you're high and rejoice and give praise to the higher power. Finally, how often do I pour out my heart to God? And really, this is like a very deep question. It's simple, but you have to think about yourself. And because you can have a conversation, right, with God, but do you actually like truly pour out the emotional? Because it is honestly all connected, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, they all feed into one. You can't have one without the other. And they all contribute, but where's your heart at? That's what I'm getting to. And I actually had a bonus question here. What walls do I need to build up for God? So think of a wall. It's an outside structure. It's meant to protect you. So just as the opposite would be a stronghold, which could hold you back from accomplishing something, building walls, aligning on purpose of unity, of building revival and doing God's work and basically utilizing your talents. That's like what everyone's searching for, I feel like today is, oh, what's my purpose in life? Well, you have the talents. You do. You need to hone in on them and work on them. And only through understanding yourself in the physical and the emotional, and then really connecting and aligning yourself on purpose with the spiritual, will you find that sense of purpose and the real sense of fulfillment that everyone's looking for. Because then nothing else is going to matter. And then you're just going to feel empty. So that's my final challenge is really, how can I create a wall? What's the work that do I need to do to create revival, create unity? So hopefully this has brought some ideas to mind. There's a lot of great scriptures in here. Nehemiah is a short book. It's very powerful. It brings up a lot of great questions. And there's so many interesting, I'm just looking at the book right now, so many interesting points, so many highlights that I have and notes here. But I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts on how you can do this. So thank you for giving me the time to go through this. Once again, not a religious expert by any means, just someone who's very interested and passionate about sharing this, because I truly think that through sharing and through taking action on this, real difference and real unity can occur. So thank you once again. God bless.